Yes, yes, yes. We are now in the season of resurrection. Happy post-resurrection Sunday, everyone. This is, this is such a special time for us in the church reflecting on all of this. And, just this Sunday, like you do, we're reflecting on the story of the resurrection. And every time, man, especially in John's gospel, Jesus has gone missing. And we find him there in the garden, right? Mistaken for the gardener. And it just struck me more this time, I think, than ever, how much this is not just some anthropocentric story, our resurrection story. But I mean, even so much so, like Jesus, there's no flashing lights. Like the only reason we know that Jesus was resurrected is that some faithful women went to go tend to the tomb, right? To go see what was going on, and their presence became what made us aware of the whole situation. Other than that, right? Jesus was just resurrected, and we were none the wiser. Jesus is resurrected, and he's out checking on his plants, because it's not just about humans, it's cosmic. It's about all of creation. It's about the reconciliation of all things, right? That humanity is encompassed within the greater salvific narrative, and it's just such good news. Okay, micro sermon over. I just had to share that with you guys because that just, that hit me, right? So, but this episode, y'all, welcome to the ecoChristian podcast. We're exploring what it means to be Christian on planet Earth, and I'm your host, Caleb Cray Haynes. As we used to say back in my day, is off the hinge. The door is on the floor. I just had the most wonderful time sitting down with none other than the executive director of Rocha International, Ed Walker. And if you don't know about Rocha, or you're way down into the goodness that is what they do in the world, either way, you're going to love hearing from Ed. But real quick, guys, I want to offer a resource spotlight because being April, there are so many good opportunities to engage in earth care this season. This is why I want you to know about Creation Justice Ministries' Plastic Jesus resource. This wonderful resource tackles the issues of plastics in thoughtful and interesting ways as it intersects with Scripture and our faith. This is a resource that will be immensely helpful for you and your church this spring in addressing issues of creation care. And so just this week, I'm talking with my wife about how we couldn't find socks for our 8-year-old that weren't primarily made from plastic. You can't make this stuff up. So the question arises for us, what does it mean to have real faith in a synthetic world? So I'm linking this resource in the show notes again for you guys to check out and download and find those sermon starters and liturgies and other great resources that are a part of that. Okay, now I think you need to get to know my new friend, Ed. Okay, I am here with my new friend, Ed Walker. Ed is the executive director for Rocha International. Ed is married with 3 children. His background is in disaster management, and he spent the first 10 years of his career in Africa working mainly in war-affected disasters. And during that time, he saw time and again the impact of a degraded environment on local communities. In 2008, he returned to England and spent the next 15 years working with the homeless there. He set up and ran Hope into Action, which is an award-winning charity which enables churches to house the homeless. He has written 2 books, the first on his time overseas, and the second one in which he has tried to capture how God has worked through the story of hope into action. As well as a degree in geography, he has an MBA, and this is really awesome. In June 2022, was awarded an MBE, which is an award given by the British monarch in recognition of achievement and service to the community. So you can't make this stuff up. Love this so much. Ed loves both the church and God's creation. He is passionate about seeing churches and Christians live out the fullness of the gospel and his role with the Rocha, which enables him to sort of marry that passion together with his love of nature and environment. So welcome, brother.
Thank you. It's a real honor to be here. And as you say, it's great to be with a new friend, Kim. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And your story's already warmed my heart, just like sharing your biography with others. And I love your journey. So what part of the UK do you live in?
Yeah, I live in a place called Peterborough, which most Americans won't have heard of because most Brits never heard of Peterborough. But it is about 30 miles north of Cambridge and about 70 miles north of London. So it's actually a really good spot because I'm in London very often, so I can just pop in there. And yeah, in a sense, I moved there when I left Khartoum when I was running the Darfur program. And weirdly, it was quite good because there was cheap housing, but there's also a high degree of homelessness. When I moved in, it had the highest rates of homelessness of any city in the country. So I guess that's probably why I sort of ended up there, if you like, in the providential worldview. Probably God knew what he was doing.
Yeah, well, I love that. And what's the name of your books?
First book is called Reflections from the Scorched Earth, and the second book is called A House Built on Love.
Well, that's great. We're going to link those in the show notes to make sure people have access to finding those. That's really wonderful. And huge shout out to our mutual friend Kate Bowen Evans, who connected us, who's doing magnificent work in the world. So holler at you, Kate, if you're listening. So
yeah, Kate is one of the coolest, the most inspiring people I've met in the field.
No,
so she's top drawer. Yeah,
that's what's up. That's what's up. So, and as far as your time with the Rocha family, I guess in your current role, how's that going for you so far? This is kind of new, as in back in the fall?
That's right. I joined 1st of September. So at the point of doing this interview, I've done 7 months. And so, yeah, tremendous honor, tremendous privilege to do this, to see the work across the world that we're doing, to be involved in setting up in places like Singapore, or to have visited our work in everywhere from Florida to Ghana to Switzerland to UK and Portugal, and very different settings. But of course, what makes us unique is that, unlike a lot of other sort of international organizations, the developing world countries aren't just raising money for the sort of developing world countries, because there's a biodiversity crisis in every country, not least my own. So in the UK, they're working really hard to get over 7,000 churches engaged in sort of restoring their lands for the use of nature and the climate and so forth. And also, from the UK, we're trying to raise money for other countries. So it's a really unique, I suppose, mission to be involved in, because everywhere needs it, literally everywhere.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I thought it'd be fun, and I should have warned you up front, but you can just wave it off if you don't want to do it. But I thought it'd be fun to do, just going to start off with like a game, and kind of like a word association game. And I thought, you haven't done this before with anyone, so you can be the guinea pig. But I thought it might be a fun way for people to get to know you a little bit more. So like I would say a word, and you could just let that take you where it takes you. You could share about a place, a person, a story. It doesn't have to be long, but it can be whatever you like.
Sounds great.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Let's start with eco.
Ego.
Eco or ego. We could go either way.
Right.
But...
Ego. Yeah, I'm inspired by that word, eco. I like to think, where I'm 47 now, but you think of the 20-year-old Ed, would he be pleased that the 47-year-old is an eco warrior? If that'll be the type of thing that I'd want the 20-year-old Ed to be proud of the 47-year-old Ed. Obviously, you wrap it up with all the management stuff that kind of comes with it now, but still to be passionate about the environment, to be dedicating your hours towards it, to try to support Christians in a movement that cares passionately about, all things eco. Yeah, I'm in for that. That sounds great.
Well, that's what's up. Okay. Slow.
Slow.
Mhm.
Slow is something I probably need a bit more of in my life. And it's, if you've ever read the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry,
Yes.
that probably is
It's really good.
work in progress for me. It is a good book. So slow is something at this stage of my life I don't think I know very well.
Okay.
Three kids, full on job,
Yeah.
life that works. So it's all good.
No, I hear that. Vegetarian.
Yeah, my daughter's a vegetarian, and I try to always, when I have the choice, I always try and not eat meat. So if anyone serves me any food, I always accept it. But when I'm out eating, I always try to eat vegetarian, and I love it. It's cheaper, it's more healthy, and I like to think it's has an environmental impact. I first started, again, it was about, I never could get, I always respected vegetarians, but could never become one because I didn't, until I heard about the impact of methane on the environment. And at that point, I'm like, well, I don't want to eat so much beef now. So, I've never eaten beef when I've eaten out ever since, and that'll be about 12 years ago. So,
Awesome.
at the same time, I think, a good pork fillet is also part of God's blessing and creation. So, I'll accept it if someone gives it to me.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I didn't realize till yesterday that quote unquote mincemeat wasn't meat. It's like isn't it like a holiday thing that or is that just
Yeah, mincemeat. I think mincemeat in this country is beef, but
okay?
I'm happy to be corrected.
Okay, well maybe I heard that from a vegetarian. So there we go. Love it. You guys do have the meat pies though, which I've had because I visited and I was like, well, I got to do this thing, and that was pretty good because meat doesn't come in pies where I'm from. So
yeah, that's strange. It's a very obvious thing for an Englishman to put meat in a pie. Yeah,
right there you go. Okay, let's see. Let's switch gears. Covenant.
Covenant. Well, I suppose there's beautiful spiritual association when I hear that word because of that covenant promises that are echoing out of the Bible. And in my current job, when I applied for the job, every different Rocha organization is bound together by a covenant. We all signed a covenant. And I took it off, I printed it off, took it to a coffee shop to read, and I was really inspired by the Rocha covenant. And in there is what's called the ACCC, the Rocha Commitment to Creation Care. And anyone listening to this can do worse than just read that and use it as a sort of a measure for their life, because a spirit, it for me outlines a really authentic spiritual life where their life is committed to creation care and a holistic sense of the gospel that cares for everything, worries about their simple lives, their footprint on the environment, and so forth. So, yeah, I got good associations with covenant.
That's really great. Link that as well. That's really wonderful. Okay, a couple more. Let's see. Garden.
Well, I guess I could be warm feelings. The Garden of Eden, the sense that is God's gift to us, and what you get in the garden is peace, isn't it? What you find. And a few times I've been to places and I would say, this is close to what the Garden of Eden was. So just rich in wildlife. The place I'm thinking of, all in Africa, I'm like, this is as close to the Garden of Eden as I've ever been. Just life teeming with everything from mammals to insects to birds to plants to to ponds, and that to me is a beautiful place. and where we will go back one day. That's what we believe, isn't it? That we will be restored, spiritually, but also our work here on earth is to restore that sense of garden land for the world.
Mm. And I love that. I love how all this is bringing us back to Rocha. So they hired the right guy. All right, best movie.
I'm rubbish at movies. I watched Top Gun the other day with my son, who's now 12, and the fact he enjoyed that, I thought, oh, that's good. And my wife was there. My wife always had a crush on Tom Cruise, so that was nice just to get back into that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, same with my wife. I so much so that one Valentine's Day they were they just released like the IMAX version of the original Top Gun. So I just took her to see that. That was our Valentine's Day. I took her to see Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer. So yeah, so good. Yeah, that's right. Well, I wonder. We've kind of touched on the high points of your story, but I wonder if we could just rewind a little bit, and if you would be willing to sort of share a bit about your journey, and I'd love for you to kind of get into some of the details, maybe how God has sort of led you where you are now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose I would start at age 22 when I was, graduating as a student. I'd been through all my life, I got to the point where you can now go and attack the world. And I just read a book, about some story through Africa. And I remember thinking, as I finished the story, the book, I put it down. I was lying on my bed as a student and just thinking, just overwhelmed by the input of investment to get me to 22, right from the start, where, nappies and breastfeeding and all the teachers, all the state money that had gone into my education, and just thought, flipping heck, so much investment to get me to 22. And I just said to God there and then, I said, look, God, I've spent 22 years taking, here I am. If I can do anything in the future, I assumed it won't happen. But by the way, I'd love to have, sense of Africa really excites me. Here I am. To cut a long story short, within 9 months, I was carrying this thing called a fax machine that your younger listeners won't remember, but a fax machine out to a country called Burundi, working for Tier Fund's disaster response team. And at that stage, Burundi is in Central Africa. It was the most dangerous country in the world, according to the UN. And we were delivering relief to, many, many displaced populations from the internal conflict there, and Rwandan refugees and Congolese refugees as well. So, and that started, in short, 10 years of working in war zones in Africa. What that does is it strips your faith right back, because, so much of what I got taught at Sunday school is really irrelevant to that. I never got taught about violence. I never got taught about suffering, really. All the answers I got given on suffering were wholly inadequate. But by contrast, I had lots of time by myself, and I found the Bible was a very sure foundation, because it's riddled with violence. Jesus suffered enormous amount of violence, the persecuted church, and every psalm seems to hint at some violence that David is undergoing. So I found that really reassuring, and the answers in the Bible to suffering were very different from the ones I was taught in Sunday school, but somehow much more reassuring, mainly that God didn't particularly answer. I found that deeply helpful, and meditated on it. So verses like Habakkuk, though the fig tree doesn't blossom, yet I will praise the Lord. All those kind of things. He started the book Habakkuk with, "Why do you make me stare at violence? Why do I have to look at suffering for so long?" So these kind of things really that's where I landed in those spiritually in those 10 years alone with God in the Bible, and that was a good place to land. I found God was faithful. God helped me. And then weirdly, my last job was working in Khartoum under Sharia law, and moved that to working in homelessness in the UK. But the interesting point is I found it easier to talk about my faith under Sharia law in Khartoum than I did working in the UK. And at that time, in 2008, I found the paradigm, was really powerful. The paradigm was kind of this: you don't take advantage of the vulnerable, and we don't do God. This is in the UK, of course. And that really rocked me, because I was like, oh, right, well, maybe that is right. And again, I had to go for a walk into the cathedral in Peterborough and read the entire book of Mark, and every miracle I added up. How many did he speak about the kingdom of God? And of his 16 miracles, 13 he actually spoke about the kingdom of God. So I thought, well, if I can't find an organization or a charity that allows me to express my faith the way Jesus did, I'll have to start my own. And that was, again, a kind of a spiritually important moment for me. And I walked out of that charity in fear and excitement, but resolved that I would start a charity that was at once spiritually true, professionally sort of excellent, humble, yet confident. And that's what I tried to do. For the next 13 years, I tried to run this thing called Hope into Action. And then I left that, and that's another story. So then I've joined Rocha now, which, again, was an amazing thing, really, because I know what's going on, but I left Hope into Action in my mid-40s with a wife, a mortgage, 3 kids, and no idea what I would do. It's the kind of thing you do in your 20s before you've even got a girlfriend, not what you do when you've got all the above baggage. But to cut a long story short, God has helped me. And I've no idea about Rocha. I read it. That's where my spirit moved. By the grace of God, I got the job. And I'm delighted and honoured to have been given a new song to sing, a new chapter of my life.
Wow. That's really beautiful. I really love that story and the posture in which you shared that speaks volumes to your work. You mentioned 2 things. I don't know if I called them right. You said that don't take advantage of the vulnerable. And did you say don't do gospel? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Tony Blair was Prime Minister at the time. His chief communicator, head of comms, said, "We don't do God." Tony Blair was a Christian, of course, but that just sort of summed up the paradigm at the time. The state was very big, so obviously being a sort of left-wing government, it poured a lot of money into the state, and the state was doing a lot of care for the poor, but it was really secularized. And what I found was, I believed in that. I started believing, the state helping the poor. I'm cool with that, but I found it was really dry.
Yeah.
And so I think even cabinet ministers now have said to me, well, what we realise is the state isn't very good at love. And, actually at the heart of Hope into Action, caring for the homeless, was love, unashamed about using that word love. And so we want to love the homeless. That's what we said, which is a weird thing to say, because if you look at most homeless charities in this country, they'll use a whole bunch of words, but they won't use the word love. But and in a sense, but that was not a naive love. Love isn't always soft, but we were clear that was our job. So, yeah, and I suppose it was a reaction against that kind of large state. And I believe the state has a role to play in society, don't get me wrong, but it's got limitations. It's only so far as the state can go. And the church can bring something, a much better story.
Wow. Man, that's really well put. There's a theme kind of, bubbling to the surface here. And I imagine as well, with your time, in Africa and seeing a lot of those connections as well, between, human suffering and that is up for love. And I wonder if you could share a little bit more of like what you saw in your time there as far as in the way of ecological care and human suffering. And was that a connection that you were drawing at that point in your life?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. 20 years ago, I was in the field in Africa. I spoken to farmers in, I don't know, let's say, just don't know exactly, but certainly 6 countries, dozens of communities. And 20 years ago, I know this is maybe harder in America to hear, but no one talked about climate change as though it's something that might be happening. They just said, yeah, because of climate change. A bit like saying, because night follows day. And they were clear that their cause to their impoverishment was climate change. And that played out in various ways. It wasn't the only cause, and that's really important for your listeners to hear, because actually it's, man's inhumanity to man that was also a massive driver. But if I can just put that into, if I place that into Darfur, where I spent 3.5 years, That was, the academics would describe that as the first desertification war. So the deserts were expanding. Now, what that meant was, if you were a camel herder, the amount of time you could graze your camels was reduced. So you had to bring them down south earlier. Now, traditionally, you've never done it that early. What that means is, as you're grazing them down south, they're now eating the crops of the other tribe. Those crops are also need harvesting later because there's less rain for them. So you have this massive crunch. Now, for centuries, those two tribes have coexisted in a kind of symbiotic way and gone along and all this sort of stuff. And that was a major cause to the conflict. As anyone, and then what happened is government basically armed up they call them the Janjaweed, the camel herders, and that led to massive war. And that's still playing out in cartoons today because it's the camel herders that have rebelled, if you're following Sudan's story. But the point is there you were, the untold suffering that we met in Darfur of, terrible impoverishment, displacement, violence, malnutrition, terrible sociological effects. You're really clear when you're there and you live it. It's a desertification war. You see it and feel it. You're in sandstorms, and so when you come back home, you don't drive your car the same way because you immediately link it in your mind to, if I accelerate too fast, I'm literally killing babies in Africa. That's how you feel. It's because that has such a profound effect on you. And so this call to a simple life, you'd be utterly heartless not for it to resonate with you. And so, again, when I applied for this job with Rocha and I read again that commitment to creation care, it was, that's the spiritual life I want to live. If I'm a Christian, I want to live a life that my whole life embodies a compassion for my brother because I love my neighbor. I can't do anything other than strive for a simple life. When Jesus taught us to pray, give us today our daily bread. He didn't say, give me today my daily bread. And so give us. The us is every single human being on the planet, both now and those to come. So the footprint I leave for future generations is also in that prayer. So so I guess it drives the spirituality, surely, if you've got any sense of that would be called towards a simple life. And part of what Rocha is trying to do is restore those habitats that have been degraded and protect them from being degraded. And of course, calling us all into not a kind of miserly existence. That's not right. But a genuine, authentic spirituality that cares for our neighbor by the way we live.
Absolutely. That's so well put. Well, maybe what we can do is kind of piggyback off of that because, I know that a lot of people that I talk to, kind of on my side of the pond over here have actually never heard of a Rocha. So I wonder if we could back up a little bit on a step and, maybe you could share for those listening, who is a Rocha? What is a Rocha? What does it do?
A Rocha is an absolutely amazing organization because it's unique in the world. 14 years ago, we've all heard of missionaries who've gone out to convert people, and we've all heard of missionaries who've gone out to feed the hungry, to bring medicine, to fight injustice. That would be fairly common narrative that most Christians in the West will be familiar with and sign up to. But 40 years ago, someone called Peter Harris and his wife went out to care for creation, care for bird life, care for a remote part of Portugal. And what I think is really important here, I've talked about caring for, creation because of its impact on human beings. So that was basically the last thing I said, and that's central, absolutely central to Rocha. Because but equally central, if not more central, is this narrative and the theology that its mission to care for God's creation, full stop. Because God created it before he created man, and he said it was good. And therefore, if you love God, you want to care for what he thinks is good. So and then you can take the theology from, that's Genesis 2, you can take it to Noah, where Noah had to care for every single bit of biodiversity on the planet. Whether you believe that literally or what the message that God is saying through that, is, we need to care for this stuff because it's important to me. And the covenant promise after the rainbow is for all of creation. It's not just for humankind. And you can track this forward, but a lot of people, for example, when you say Jesus said, go preach good news to all what? Most people know the Matthew translation is go and disciple all nations. Actually, in Mark, he said, go preach good news to all creation. So, but we tend to limit it just to humankind. And you've gone on and on. And throughout, there's loads of other stuff in the Bible that since I've joined Rocha, I'm learning about. But you see, at the heart of Rocha is a call to care for creation for its own good, and to care for creation and the communities around it for the good of humankind, for mankind as well. Because humans and nature always have and always will interact. So if you're trying to protect a forest, you need to protect the community around it and give them all livelihoods, jobs and incomes. That means they don't have to destroy the forest in order to get jobs and incomes. So they're intrinsically interlinked, always have been and always will be. But the exciting thing about Rocha is it says, one, we care for creation, full stop, because that is God's, and he says good, and it's infinitely wonderful. And two, by doing that, we care for humankind around in every community, because we are richer when we're living in a healthy relationship with our environment. And be that farming, be that how you kind of harvest trees, how you plant trees to get as an income. There's no end to the kind of applications of that. But that at its heart is the heart of Rocha. And it started 40 years ago to kind of, it's now in over 20 countries with another 20 odd in our network. And it's in America, it's in the UK, but also it's in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Philippines, Peru. So, every kind of New Zealand. So it's really every type of state you can imagine. We're about to open up in Singapore. There is a mission, there is a calling to look after nature of that city, town, country.
It's just, I love the fact that it began right as bird sanctuary, and it just spread wings, and it's kind of the logic of what you're saying is that if you care for one piece of it, you're inherently moving toward caring for all the pieces, because all of these things are interconnected, and there's no such thing as human well-being apart from ecological well-being and caring for creation, full stop. And so, yeah, it's like the heartbeat of once you peel the layers back of what it means to be a people created within a planet by a God who's a creator, and I love how that is expressed through the work of Rocha around the world. So Rocha kind of leans on the arm of conservation. Would you say that?
Yeah, at its heart is conservation. So we would say we were the only Christian global conservation organization seeking to conserve everything from coral reefs to forests in the Amazon, to forests in Africa, to wetlands, to bird life, to a whole variety of applications from that. But we are conservationists, and conservation, I think, is a difficult word to understand. But we conserve jam, don't we? But I think it might be helpful to think of it as nature conservationists, and wanting to be in that space, which is largely devoid, actually, of Christian. So I'm going somewhere tonight, kind of conference. We'll be the only Christians there. And you think, we know that's the first thing we learn in the Bible, because God created the world, and yet we've been put to shame by many others around the world in terms of their reach, in terms of their global impact, in terms of their publicity, and so on and so forth. So you have the sense that Christians have a long way to catch up in this field, to be able to say, no, and we need to be earning their respect for the quality of the work we're doing, not just because of the quality of the songs we sing, but actually on the ground. Are our feet getting muddy? Are we doing the hard yards? Are we, does this matter to us? And so I hope in that conservation field we are respected as professionals. And also the other part of what we want to do is inspire more Christians into this space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're naming there, and what you were kind of naming earlier, is this interesting juxtaposition or dance that we're in, where what the church is quote unquote known for, hopefully, right, is our love in a place and our embodiment of a gospel that is centered around God's love. But then you've kind of got, in this situation, right, the maybe quote unquote the science community, or the people who are like, professionally ecologists and that sort of thing, without the faith aspect. But as you were sort of naming earlier, like and you were referencing your hope into action work, but that love piece, like that's the gift, right? And more than that, what we're saying is, can it even happen really without love? And that's sort of the dance I feel like I find myself in. So similarly, I was just at a climate justice conference, and I'm probably the only one there representing just strictly the Christian work. But I don't know. I mean, to be honest, like I don't know how people keep going or don't toss and turn endlessly with it, in and out of the night, knowing the issues of climate and all these other things without the Jesus is Lord piece. Does that make sense? I know I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but
no, I think it's a really important thing that we bring, a really important message we bring, because as you say, humanly speaking, the future of our planet is overwhelmingly depressing and actually despairing. And yet we believe in the mystery of a God that is all powerful and is overcome. And we believe in a future heaven and a future earth. Now, and working towards that. So I don't want to get into the kind of eschatology of the end of the times, but I'm not an expert in that. But very much I would say we are building heaven on earth, and that is our role here. So, and trusting in that God is got a plan, He's got this sorted. That's not a way of abdicating our responsibility. Far from it. He needs co-workers, and we take that responsibility on, and we work in partnership with Him. But at our heart, we trust and believe it's going to be okay. I don't know how, I don't know where, but it's going to be okay. And that is a really profound message, a hope that Christianity brings into this space. And again, theologians like Peter Harris and Dave Wilkins have articulated for us. But that we need to carry into that part of the world that you've articulated, the science communities and the climate justice communities, because it's really important they hear it,
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm kind of sitting with a lot of that. And it's interesting right now because we're entering into this season of resurrection as the church, and and I'm tempted to get down in that, but just thinking about our theology around how resurrection might inform or come alongside our work in earth care, and how hopeful that is. I think sometimes we think about those as opposites, and celebrating Resurrection Sunday can feel like an opposite some way, in the way of like when we talk about escapism rather than redemption. So, for instance, I had a conversation maybe yesterday or the day before with a friend who's doing some of this kind of work with me in creation care in the church, kind of up in the Pennsylvania area. And he's sharing with me how he met someone recently who, this was a primary reason that he had left the church, because the church, from his perspective, was saying nothing and doing nothing for the earth. Anyway, so I this is where Rocha ultimately is just so encouraging, I think, for us.
Totally. I mean, I've only been here a short time in this job, but I've met several young people. One young lady, 21, moved away from home, daughter of a pastor, so grown up in church. As a student, heard a sermon for the first time in her life on climate and environment, and went up to the preacher and said, "Oh, does this mean Christians can't care about this sort of thing?" And I found that so tragic that she hadn't realized that until that point. And it's a really big issue for the world. And if, coming back to your point around, the resurrection, if we boil the resurrection down to a gospel that is just about humankind, or even just about saving souls, we're missing a big chunk of it, because John 3 tells us that God he didn't just love humankind, he so loved the world that he sent his only son. And that's a really important message that we mustn't cut out. We mustn't reduce our gospel down to human beings or even human souls. It's got to be bigger than that. The gospel I'm passionate about is far bigger than that, and interlinks beautifully with our own souls. My soul is redeemed when I care for creation, and my sense of self, my sense of God, grows. And if you love God, you will love what he loves. So it's a phony love, otherwise it's not a love. It can't be a love, can it? So and that gospel, that preaching of the gospel, that unpacking of what it means to be a Christian, to be much fuller, I think is really important that the church grasps and preaches confidently, because the world needs to hear it. Young people need to hear it. Young people in every country need to hear it. But they care about this sort of stuff. They read about it. It matters to them. They need to turn to us. They need to find the answer. They need to find a sanctuary in the church on this issue.
Yeah. It's so ironic, because I think so much of what holds the church back from engaging more into the embracing this conversation is fear. And obviously there's politicized fear, there's even theological fear, maybe related, or just like the unknownness of the past how many ever centuries that we haven't really taken this seriously as we should. And now creation is groaning so much that it's really forcing us to. But yet once you sort of move through that, like, I feel like the gospel becomes so much more embodied, so much more good news. Like the it's like cosmic love, right? And cosmic salvation. Once you realize it's not just anthropocentric, it's not just about us, not just about me. And that, I'm not afraid of that. That makes it, man, that's like saturating the sponge, that's like it gets really good and it gets really beautiful. And I suppose that's what, I hope that our listeners catch more and more of, and the church catches more and more of, is that saturation, I guess. I don't know if I'm saying this like I'm thinking about it, but
no, you 100% more you say. So you're articulating much better than I am. So it's a beautiful gospel when you put it that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the alternative is gospel that saves humans but exploits the earth, and that's a disgusting gospel. That's horrible. And when you go to an exploitative gospel, a gospel that allows us to exploit the earth, is not an attractive one.
Yeah. Well, let's with a couple minutes left, maybe let's turn back into the praxis part of it. I'm curious of, like, for this, you personally, maybe is there anything that's challenging right now for you in the way of this work or the work of Earth Care, personally, or like it feels like a kind of a learning curve?
Yeah, I think it's weird. I would say two things. One, my learning curve is been steep from day one and remains very steep, and that's a great joy. But there's huge amounts for me to learn. That will always be the case, I'm sure, as long as I'm in this job. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is it does feel really important spiritually. I feel prayer is needed. I've never needed it before. And I think I don't quite know why that is, but I would just, call out people to join us in praying. Then if you follow us on Rocha.org, next month there is an Earth Day. You're sending out an appeal there. And I can tell you this, we could really do with some more funds right because the needs of the world are vast. And we're just 20 staff in Rocha International, and there's other staff around the world. But do get in touch, do support us, do reach out, do pray for us, do connect to us. We would love to hear from you and build relationships with you and enable you to sort of offer something to this form of the gospel. If anything we've talked about has touched you and you can't give time, you can't give money, then just get in touch, because we'd love to talk about that. If you want to volunteer for us or work for us or anything like that, then there are opportunities right around the world. So we'd love to hear from people.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. Any last words of encouragement for others wanting to, take that next step of earth care or conservation wherever they live, or maybe if there's a little advice that you might throw out?
Yeah, I think there can be people who, God puts on their heart a love for nature, and they've sat in the back of the pews all their lives, and they've never found that expressed from the front of church, and therefore they feel a bit lonely. They feel they're not quite fitting, and our Rocha is a really safe tent. It's a home for people like that. So, some people have a heart for evangelism, some people have a heart for injustice, some people have a heart for, youth ministries, and some people have a heart to bring God's love for nature to the fore. If you're the latter person, well, if you're any of the above, please get in contact, because I support youth work, but I also support this kind of stuff. So, but if you're that person who's felt a bit lonely, I'd encourage you to listen to our podcast, get one of our books, because you'll find in there a narrative for your faith that you can express your faith through. And you might find, okay, I can feel at home now. My faith, my passion for the environment, they're interconnected. They're all one. And if that's you, then check us out, because you'll find a safe place for yourself.
That's what's up. Grace and peace. Thanks, Ed.
No worries.
We're all in this work together, y'all. If you appreciate this conversation, please leave us a review on the app of your choosing and share this with your neighbor. May the God of love guide you forward in this Christian work of ecological restoration, friends.